Hi, this is Coach Mario. For all students of chess and for parents of young players, it is important to realize that what often appears to be a losing blunder is not a blunder and not the reason for losing a chess game. Okay, let's take a look at some examples to clarify this point and to discuss the repercussions. Okay, this is our first game we're going to look at, and this is the final position. Here, it's Black's turn, and Black resigned. This game played between two strong masters, and Black realized that he was either going to lose material or be checkmated soon if White played well. Now, if you're not playing a master, you should continue to play on because your opponent may not play well and you may be able to save the game. However, if you do play on, you need to understand that if your opponent plays well and you end up losing material or being checkmated, that you wouldn't call that a blunder because it was unavoidable if your opponent plays well. The mistakes that led to this losing position happened much earlier in the game, and in a moment we're going to go back and look at those. But those were also not blunders. They were smaller mistakes, and they added up over time because White played very well to take advantage of them. If Black wants to use this game for instructive purposes, then he should go back and look at those mistakes that were earlier in the game. Okay, this is the same game we were looking at between two strong masters, but this is much earlier in the game, and it's Black's move. Now here Black has a couple of options, and maybe the option he didn't choose would have been better. It's difficult to say. Black already has a slightly difficult to position, so it's easy in hindsight to say, well, maybe Black should have taken the other option. The other option Black may have played is queen to c8 to guard his pawn that's being attacked. But Black chose to guard the pawn by putting his queen on the b6 square. And after White attacked the queen, the best move she had, and the only move that didn't lose material, was to take the White queen, and then White captured the Black queen. But after this trade of queens, White's rook is able to put a lot of pressure on the Black queen side, and even after a move like a6, White will continue to bring the knight to the a5 square, and Black's defensive task is going to be very difficult for many, many moves. And that sows the seeds of loss because it's very difficult to find the best defensive move in a passive position, move after move after move. And if any more inaccuracies or small mistakes are made, White's position may become winning. And that's what we saw happen in this game. Okay, let's go back even earlier to see where Black may have been able to avoid even getting into this situation and therefore possibly avoid the loss position at the end. Okay, we've gone back even earlier in the same game between the two strong masters, and here it is Black to move on his fifth move, and Black played bishop to e7. A solid move. Certainly we can't call that a blunder or the reason that Black lost the game later. It's not a losing move. Black's position is not lost at all. However, it didn't stop White from setting up the ideal situation on the queen side where White was able to pressure Black so well, thanks to, in part, to the strong bishop on f4. So in hindsight, maybe Black should have played something else, perhaps bishop to d6, for instance, to challenge the bishop. At least this would have avoided the very difficult situation that Black got into in a few more moves that we just took a look at a moment ago. So as you can see, this game was not lost because of any one blunder. There were no horrible moves played by Black in this game. But he did end up losing because he made several small inaccuracies, and it's difficult to even judge which moves were the actual mistakes that led to the loss. We do know that White played very well also to take advantage of those small mistakes. Okay, now let's take a look at another game. Here's the next game we're going to look at. This game, one of my students, Alex, had the Black pieces, and Black is in a very difficult situation because for one thing, his bishop is blocked in by a center pawn. Black never found a way to really activate that bishop and find a useful job for this bishop. The White knight, on the other hand, has a lot of options. The White knight is much better than the Black bishop in this position. And here my student blundered with rook to f6. That allowed white to play this knight fork. And white won material, and eventually white won the game. However, I didn't focus with my student Alex on this final blunder, if you even can call it a blunder, because black's position is extremely difficult. He never really found a good way to activate his rooks. He's trying to swing them over to attack the white king, but in this position, that's probably not going to be enough. He needed to find a better way to activate them much earlier in the game. Same thing with the bishop. So when we went over this game, that's what I went back to. We went back to earlier points in the game to discuss the mistakes that were made to not do a better job of activating the bishop and the rooks. Here, in fact, it's almost impossible to find a move for black that doesn't lose material or lead to an attack on the king. Rook e7 maybe holds out for a while, but black's position is so difficult that if white plays reasonably well, black is going to blunder sooner or later. And it may, I shouldn't even say blunder, black is going to lose material sooner or later, or allow his king to be attacked. And it may be already too late. It may be that with perfect play that white is going to win, and no matter what black tries to defend with. So I didn't really focus on this move too much and after the game, and I wouldn't call it a blunder, because the reason black lost this game is because of earlier moves. Now let's go back and look at some of those earlier situations where black could have played better. Those moves also were not blunders. They were serious mistakes, though, that did lead to black having this very difficult position. Okay, let's get to the next position. Black needs to think about how he's going to activate that bishop. We saw what happened much later when he didn't, that it got into trouble. Here, for instance, black played queen to d7, connecting the rooks, but there were more important things to do at this point. Perhaps it was a good time on this move, or maybe even the move before or the move after, to take this pawn, so that with that trade of pawns now, there is no obstacle on d5 blocking his bishop, so his bishop is more active now. White's position is still better, much better perhaps, but at least the bishop is now activated. So this is one point where black probably could have played better by thinking more about his bishop. The other problem for black that we're going to discuss as well are those rooks. Black has an open file for the rooks at all at the moment, but pawn takes pawn would at least half open the d file for the rooks. White, on the other hand, can activate his rook on the c file anytime he wants by capturing the black pawn. And in fact, after queen to d7, that's what white did. Now white has a half-open c-file for his rooks. Black has a half-open e-file, but that is a little more difficult to take advantage of in this situation for black. And so white has the advantage here. Once again, we see that situation where black may not be losing yet, but he's sown the seeds of defeat into this position, because black is going to have to defend passively for a very long time, and that's very difficult for a human to do, of any age or of any level. Okay, now let's go back and see where black could have perhaps activated his bishop or rooks earlier in the game to avoid this kind of passive situation. Okay, now we've moved back even earlier in the same game, where Alex played on his fourth move pawn to e6, but there are some problems with this move. The pawn blocks in the bishop from coming out, and we saw that this bishop had problems for the rest of the game becoming active. Another problem with this move is that because black has also blocked his c-pawn by moving out the knight in front of the c-pawn, black is going to have problems initiating pawn trades. White can easily initiate a pawn trade by playing pawn to c4 because he has not blocked his c-pawn with a knight yet. And so we saw that white was very active. His rooks were very active later in the game, whereas black's rooks never seemed to really find useful jobs to do. And so black is trying to just bring out his pieces quickly without thinking about how they're going to function in the middle game. He's not planning ahead, and so later his rooks and bishop didn't have very useful jobs. And these are the mistakes that led to the loss of the game, not the loss of material toward the end, where black's position was probably already losing. In this final diagram, black, three-time world champion, is on the move, and he resigned because he knows that any move he makes is either going to lose material or allow checkmate soon. However, the rest of us should not resign. The rest of us should keep fighting and hope for the best. Maybe our opponent will make a mistake. We don't play grandmasters very often. We play average players. We should keep fighting. However, if our opponent plays well and we end up losing material or being checkmated, then we shouldn't feel bad about those last few moves. We shouldn't call those last few moves blunders. The mistakes in this game happened much earlier in the game, and they were not blunders. They were just small mistakes, and white played well enough to take advantage of those small mistakes, leading to this winning advantage for white. Of course, many games are lost because of simple blunders, but even in those cases, it may not be due to carelessness. Sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves and cannot remember doing that during a game, or particularly children sometimes forget by the time the game is over, what their emotional state was or how much pressure they were putting on themselves. They may not even be aware of it in the first place. So we need to be extra careful to be gentle. Don't be harsh after a game is lost. It's difficult enough to lose a chess game. Don't make it worse.